Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to Pods Above Replacement, part of the Padres Hot Tub Podcast Network. My name is Raphie Cantor. I am the producer of Padres Hot Tub, and joining me from the Mile High City, he's our designated survivor. It's John Precoda!
Nobody's about to bomb Denver, Colorado, so this podcast will outlive any nuclear war. We're going on. We're going deep into the night.
That's right. It's the State of the Union address, only we are not talking about the debt ceiling. We will instead be talking about the state of San Diego Padres pitching in the year 2023. But first, as always, we hope you're watching us on YouTube at Padres Hot Tub. We are also available on the YouTube Music app as one of those fun YouTube hybrid podcasts where you're walking around listening on the YouTube Music app in your pocket. John's talking about some crazy cool visual stat that he wants to show the people a wonderful photo of, and you can just pull it out of your phone and boom, it's right there. It's pretty incredible. Make sure to subscribe. We've had an influx, a wave of subscribers over the last couple of weeks. It's been quite fun to see the show grow and find a new audience. Please comment as well. That really helps other people find the show. Some of you have been leaving very nice comments, by the way. So I really appreciate you guys checking in on that. And last but not least, of course, check out our other videos. You know, we conceived of this show in part as something that, you know, our videos would be sort of evergreen in some way. And certainly our player profiles, I think, fit that bill. So if you like this video, if you're watching us for the first time, go on back. You can pause it here. I won't mind. You can come back and watch this one. But if you want to stick around, we're going to talk about Padres pitching. And John, if you had to sum up what the state of Padres pitching was, what is the state of our union there?
So far, it's been immaculate based on the results. A little bit less so in terms of the peripherals, but we'll dive into that a little bit, I think. And then we'll also be diving into what we can expect going forward.
So let's talk about the now, which is we're going to talk about the now, and then we're going to talk about the future in a little bit. And then maybe at the end, we'll sprinkle in a little more kind of organizational, structural things that we could be discussing about where we're heading with pitching. But right now, we have a starting rotation that is effectively there are 6 starters, 5 pitching at any given time. And it is Yu Darvish, Joe Musgrove, Blake Snell, Michael Wacha, Seth Lugo, and Ryan Weathers, and Nick Martinez, of course. So actually there's 7. But Nick Martinez is, sometimes he likes to go both ways, as we say, in baseball. So let's just quickly break down some of these contracts, and John, I'll pass it to you to talk about some of the AJ Preller specials. But Yu Darvish, very simple. He signed a 6-year extension prior to the beginning of the season. That is an $18 million average annual value, $108 million total. So he will be pitching with us through 2028. Joe Musgrove signed a 30-year. Excuse me, he's 30 years old. Signed a 5-year, $100 million extension. Not the 30-year contract.
Sounds about right.
I mean, if AJ could do it, he would do it.
Options every 6 months for 30 years. That sounds right.
Exactly. Every fiscal quarter, he can opt in or not. That is so. Like I said, a 5-year, $100 million contract, $20 million average annual value. Blake Snell, contract year, baby. You know it. Walk year. We're going to see that Eye of the Tiger is going to start playing any day now on Blake Snell. But for right now, he will be walking away at the end of this year. And that brings us to Michael Wacha, who has perhaps the AJ Prelleriest. Prellerin? What is the demonym of Preller?
It's Preliost. It's the Prelios of Preller contracts, yeah.
Okay, so what? Please, can you explain? Because my head hurts just looking at this thing.
I mean, mine does too. The important part, I think, is that he has a 6.5 million AAV. At least that's what I think he sold Seidler on was okay, we're only going to cost $6.5 million against the cap every year, but it is that risk inverse contract wherein he has player options for each of the next 3 seasons, and then if he voids those, we can pick up a 2-year option in which he gets paid $16 million for each of 2024 and 2025, which I think that we can all agree, unless he's player of the month in June, July, and August as well, he's probably not going to be given $16 million for both the years 2024 and 2025. So he is one that is likely to opt out if he does well, likely to take the money while he can if he plays poorly. But, the good part for Seidler, the selling point for Seidler is it's still only $6.5 million against the cap. And, if May has anything to do with things that are going forward, he's been worth the money so far.
So you're telling me you don't think an 0.84 ERA in the month of May is sustainable?
Hey, I'm not saying it's not. We discussed this before. You never know. He might have his Snell year right now, win his Cy Young, and get $32 million the next 2 years.
But some guy on Twitter named SD Bolts 5 Ever F Spanos told me that it was going to last forever. So you're telling me that he's lying to me?
He said that?
He said that.
Oh, shoot. I didn't know he said that.
Yeah. So anyway, we might be getting in some sort of online brawl later on. Moving on. Seth Lugo. At least this one's simple. He has a 2-year, $15 million contract with an opt-out right in the middle. So at the end of this year, he can either opt into his $7.5 million option or hit the market. And depending on how he pitches when he comes back from his calf soreness, I think that will be determinant of whether or not he opts in. And now back to Big Dick Nick, tightest pants west of the Mississippi. What's going on with him? Is he going to be a Padre next year or not? I don't know.
I don't know either, but I do think that he has the tightest pants east of the Mississippi as well. His contract is very similar to Waka's. He also has a relatively low AAV, $8.7 million, which I would argue is not a very low AAV for a reliever. However, it is pretty low for a back 4 or 5 starter. It's the same thing. It's like, is he gonna trigger his option on our end, wherein we essentially pay him 2 years, $32 million, or is he gonna take a 2-year, $16 million extension instead? And that kind of probably has to do with how well he pitches in relief, and or if he gets a second shot at starting in the second half of the season, which we'll see. I mean, I don't know what the plan is with Lugo, with Martinez, whether Waka gets a little bit of a break as well. We'll see.
Well, that leaves us with Ryan Weathers, who is still a very, very young player. He has 2 more pre-ARB years after 2023, and 2 more option years in which he can be sent back down to the minors. And then after that, he has 3 ARB years. So by my math, that would mean he would be with us through the 2027 season, I believe. So he will be on the Padres for a very long time, assuming he is not traded. John, there's a
don't make that assumption. You can't always make that assumption.
Yes, cannot make that assumption. And there's a name on this list. I don't think I'm. Is that Cole Hamels? I've never heard of this man. Who is he?
I know that he's a Dodgers fan. Cole Hamels is a Dodgers fan, and a very young one. No, but he. I was just before this episode started. I was trying to look up. Like I knew that there was like a story before the season started that he was going to come back in June. Which, fun fact, it's June now. He's a 39-year-old, and there's been no minor league stats that I've seen so far. Maybe they're hidden somewhere, but I don't know. It seems like he's trying to play that Roger Clemens role where he just comes for the second half of the season every year. But I don't know if you remember this. Roger Clemens was good every year, and Cole Hamels hasn't been good in 3 years. So we'll see. I mean, at some point he's coming back, I think. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see whether he performs well in the minor leagues, and then we're suddenly like, oh, do we move Lugo out of the rotation for 39-year-old Cole Hamels? Like, I guess we'll see.
We will see indeed. And speaking of what we will see, we have played 2 months of baseball in the 2023 season, about 4 to go. And, while that is a decent sized sample, certainly for pitching where you have guys playing once a week, maybe they, get lucky, get to throw twice in the same calendar week. There are some small sample sizes that we're dealing with. So John, could you take us through some of our top line guys in terms of how they've been performing so far?
Yes, I can, and this is going to be fun. Okay, just getting Darvish out of the way. Darvish has underperformed a little bit, but Darvish is just Darvish. He's going to probably be good while he's pitching, while he's healthy, and we'll see if his lower back sustains over the course of the year. He's been underperforming his peripherals so far, and he just had a very poor outing against the New York Yankees, so we'll see going forward, but I'm not concerned about Yu Darvish's ability on the mound. I am a little bit concerned about his health at 36 years old, but we'll just push him to the side because he's not someone who makes me concerned for the things that you can control, which are your ability on the mound. There's a little bit of concern for his health, and hopefully Cole Hamels is not going to be taking over for him at some point. But while he's healthy, I'm not concerned about it. We'll talk about Joe Musgrove in a little bit. The fun one that I wanted to get into was Blake Snell, who I think Padres fans as a whole kind of recognize as somebody who struggles in the first half of a season. And, he struggled in the first half of this season. He has a 4.50 ERA at this point. His peripherals suggest that he's actually performed worse than a 4.50 ERA pitcher. And for his career in the first half, he's a 4.07 ERA pitcher in the first half and a 2.74 ERA pitcher in the second half, which suggests that he's just wildly better in the second half. And before I calm your nerves about that, it's actually June is the month in which he tends to perform his worst overall. His career June ERA is actually 5.35. So let's just get through June, and then we can start feeling excited about what Snell has for the second half. But just going through his numbers for his career as a Padre, I stumbled upon a little fun fact, which is the Padres' record in games in which Blake Snell starts. So Blake Snell has started 63 games as a Padre, which is not a small sample size, and we're not boomers here who are saying he dictates whether we win or lose, but I think it is a fun little sample of what exactly we have done in the games in which he started. And so just because 63 games is not a normal sample size in which to take, I'll extrapolate that over a 162 game season and just say if Blake Snell had performed at the same rate that he's performed over the 63 games, what would the Padres' record be in a 162 game series in which he was the starting pitcher? What do you say?
Okay. I want to try and be, because obviously right now he's pitching poorly. So I want to, except for this last start in Miami. But so I don't want to be clouded by that. By we're in a Blake Snell first half. He obviously has thrown 2 second halves in San Diego. So he's had some excellent time. But I still think we have a losing record. So I'm gonna say that we are. I actually think we have not done that well. So I'm gonna say that we are over a 162 game season. We are 68-94.
That's pretty bad. 68-94. You think we're that bad with Blake Snell over 162 game season? 68-94. That's like that.
That's not good.
That's not good at all. That's a very poor team. That's a top 10 draft pick team.
I just feel we haven't. Yeah.
We are, if you round up, you have to round up to get here. But if we round up, we are a 62-100 team.
Yeah.
Extrapolated over a full season. We are 24-39 in his games, which is a 381 win percentage, which if you saw the WAR video is not extraordinarily higher than a replacement level team, which we are a little bit of a stat head podcast in general, so we wouldn't necessarily say that's what you would expect going forward. because he has put up like 6.2 F-WAR in these 3 seasons so far, which is not a 0 F-WAR, which is what you'd expect by his results. However, you can say, replace that guy with basically anyone over, the past 63 games that he played, and our record would probably be pretty similar. Like, it wouldn't be much worse. You never know, but like probably it wouldn't be much worse than that. It's just sad. So far this year, he's 2-9 in his games. His actual record is 1-6 for whatever that's worth. But we've been 2-9 in the games in which he started. Last year it was 10-15, 10-15, and then the year before that it was 12-15. Oof.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what the offensive numbers are in those games. I mean, certainly this year
they've got to be terrible.
But they've just got to be terrible because, like, even I'm sure there are some games that are in second halves, like in the prior 2 seasons, where like he has a great performance and then we give him absolutely nothing, and that is contributing to his poor win-loss record. We're gonna get to Michael Wacha in a sec. Is there anything you wanted to sprinkle in on Wacha before I dive in?
Yeah, in our infamous Wacha video, you teased before, go back and watch a video. Nobody's watched the Michael Wacha video, so go back and watch the Michael Wacha video. It's actually pretty good, I think. I think it was in the top half of our videos, but nobody watched it.
We take our shirts off at some point in the video. Just trust us.
Things get crazy in the Michael Wacha video. It's not till the second half, so nobody saw it, but it's crazy. But the point is that he just won Pitcher of the Month with his 3-0 record and 0.84 ERA in his 5 starts, 32 innings, 3 earned runs, 147 batting average against. Like, he just dominated. He had a 0.72 whip. And so I mean, maybe Michael Wacha goes forward with a 0.84 ERA and 0.72 whip. It's probably not something that you would expect over the long term, and like peripherals say that it's just not what you'd expect going forward. It sounds as though, I mean, every month you get about 5 starts, and it sounds as though he might have lined up 5 particularly good starts in a row in this particular month.
So I was so curious about this because I was like looking at his numbers and I was like, I gotta understand. There's such a wide gulf between his March and April and May. I'm like, he has to be doing something different. Like, he has to be. And he's really not. Like, he's really not. And like, that's the thing that I looked at his StatCast, pitch breakdown stuff, which I will put in the video. So hopefully you're watching right now, as you should always be on YouTube. But broke down his pitches between April and May. And listen, literally everything's the same. The spin rate is the same. The extension is the same. Like everything from a mechanic standpoint is the same. But the results have just been like absolutely wildly different. In April, for instance, on his fastball, he had an expected WOBA of 371, and in May it was 286, which is like, crazy, but not. It's like a 100-point difference, but it's not like, oh my gosh, this guy is not giving up any runs whatsoever. But then you go to, for instance, his curveball in April had a 628 expected WOBA on it, and his curveball in May had a 313 expected WOBA. So that will definitely do it for you when it comes to looking at certain pitches changing in terms of from month to month. I don't know what that was. That was gibberish. I'm overwhelmed by these numbers, but his
curveball performed better.
Its curveball performance better. Yeah. The only thing I really noticed is that he stopped throwing the cutter to lefties in May. He was throwing it about 50-50 between righties and lefties in the month of April, and to terrible results. He had a 555 expected WOBA on it. And then in May, he was like, okay, I'm only throwing this pitch to righties. He threw it like a few times to lefties, and the numbers went down. He had an expected WOBA of 298. So it was like basically cut in half. And so that will help. But I don't think that explains an entire month of wonderful performance. So I wanted to look into, his batted ball profile. Like, okay, maybe he's inducing like much worse contact. He's not. His fly ball rate actually went up in the month of May, which shocked me. His line drive rate drastically decreased. It went from 25.3% in March and April to 14.5%. And just so folks are aware, that 25.3% he had in March and April is actually like pretty close to like what league averages. So it's the 14.5% line drive rate is like very, very, very low for the month of May. But when you look at his expected FIP numbers, which is a stat that we got into last time, where basically it eliminates home runs and replaces it with what a pitcher's fly ball rate, and then compares that to the league home run to fly ball rate, which basically says like, okay, like you give up this many fly balls at a given time. Well, statistically, like if we were to project this performance over the course of a season, because this many fly balls turn into home runs, we expect you to have this FIP. And his expected FIP in the month of in March and April, in that combined month, was 4.45. His expected FIP in May was 4.50. So like literally the same numbers, because he's putting up basically the same fly ball rate. His strikeout rate's basically the same. His walk rate basically the same. He just gave up fly balls that didn't go for home runs. Like that's it. It's just like what the whole freak out about Michael Wacha is that he happened to have a really good performance in a very clean time window. You know what I mean? Like it's like it feels good and nice and neat because it happened in a month, so he can get a Pitcher of the Month award. And so everyone's like, "Oh, Michael Wacha, this guy, crazy." Red Sox fans on suicide watch because Michael Wacha threw an incredible month. It's like, no, like he just like happened to group together starts, and like we haven't done this yet, but I bet you if you went through 5 different games, like which is how many games he threw in May. If you tried to get a 5-game sample in his career that was better than this, I bet you wouldn't be able to find one. So that's just the way it works out. Yeah, it's just like that's just baseball. That's the way it works out, and it's nice and it feels good, and it's something that it's a nice story we get to tell ourselves. But Michael Wacha is not going to be pitching like this. His fastball is still not good, and his location is still pretty good. But as we've talked about on the show, and John, you've harped on constantly, location is unstable in baseball. Like it's just not something that's going to hold, because on a given pitch by pitch basis, you miss on average by over a foot. So I don't think you're going to be able to rely on Michael Wacha to just be locating his pitches like a sniper for 162 games. So not sustainable, John.
Yeah, there are certain pitchers who are obviously better than that 13-inch rule, but Michael Wacha is not shown to be like a fantastic controller of the zone. And another thing, mentioning the Wacha episode, which I swear is pretty good. You guys should go back and watch. We talk about how in this offseason he was trying to work on a slider/cutter pitch, and my thoughts in the episode were that he's never been able to do that before, and he doesn't have good spin rate. So it's kind of I'll touch on this later when we're talking about another pitcher, but when you don't have high spin rates, it's kind of hard to just develop a slider/cutter or really any kind of breaking ball when you don't already have it and it doesn't have good results. And so it does seem as though he spent the offseason trying to see if he could make something out of his slider/cutter. And then in April, he experimented with it a little bit, and now he's slowly like, this is not getting good results. So maybe I'll, use it exclusively against righties or whatever, but it's just not it's a trick pitch more than it is if somebody knows that you have this and knows that it's coming, they're probably going to crush it.
Yeah. So before we move on to Joe Musgrove, Michael Wacha, just want to point out that in this month where we got 3 earned runs in 5 games from Michael Wacha in 30-something innings from him, in games in which he pitched, we were 3-2. Okay, like because they had that game at the beginning of the month against Cincinnati that was at home. He threw great, and then they lost at the last minute. And then Yankees, it was the game that went to extra innings in the Bronx that they lost, in which he gave up. By the way, on the theme of home runs to fly balls, a little port shot to DJ LeMahieu. that he was left in the game and he left a fastball up. And well, lo and behold, it went a report shot that would not have been a home run in most major league ballparks. But like, this is the point that we're talking about when we're talking about like the fly ball rate is just incredibly variable under a small sample size. Is like, yeah, if he was playing in Yankee Stadium, he would have been punished a lot more for the way he was pitching but he plays in Petco Park. And that's just the benefit that he gets in the month of May. So with that in mind, we can wrap up talking about the starters with Joe Musgrove, John.
This is just the upsetting part about May in general, is that it feels like, rolling your dice, we rolled like an 11 on our luck on what we would have expected from our pitchers in the month of May, like Michael Wacha winning pitcher of the month type luck. And, the other team just rolled a 12. And it's like, we wasted our 11 on our luck, which is not necessarily to say what's going forward, but Michael Wacha is not going to win the pitcher of the month every year. And we didn't even perform well in May. It's like, it just does seem like we spent a lot of our pitching luck on poor performances. And, every time we win, we win by 5. Every time we lose by 1. It was a frustrating month. But yeah, moving on. I mean, whenever I look at a pitcher, there's just like certain things that raise my hackles and things that don't. And just Musgrove's kind of story behind how this season has gone so far is, obviously he got hurt. He had no chance to kind of build up. He had to kind of probably work himself into the pitcher that he normally is. And so far this year, that all, kind of makes sense. He's performed poorly as a 4.71 ERA so far. But to be fair, his xERA is 3.45, it looks like, which is, just in line with how it's been the last couple years. He has been working his way up, getting more pitches per outing so far this year. And, it looks like a pitcher who's working his way into a regular season, who started off, late. And we're not going to get a 4.71 ERA Joe Musgrove going forward. So he is the anti Michael Wacha. Like, I don't expect Wacha to perform at the pitcher of the month level going forward. But I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Musgrove is at least, towards the top of a pitcher of the month, voting going forward. Maybe he doesn't win it, but maybe he's in the top 5. I wouldn't be surprised. So he does not raise any of my hackles. All his pitch shapes look the same. His expected ERA looks about the same, except for that, he hasn't built himself up yet.
Yeah. And, speaking of that, there was an article that came out this week when we're recording this about how Joe Musgrove worked on his mechanics before the series in New York. And then, he went out and threw a start in New York that was phenomenal, and then followed it up with an even better start in Miami. And it was all about, how he works with Ruben Niebla, the pitching coach, who we'll talk about later in this episode, and worked on his mechanics. And I have a video where I decided I just wanted to break down what some of those differences were. But on the left are going to be performances from before the mechanics change, and on the right are going to be performances from after the mechanics change. And both of the ones on the left are home runs, and both of the ones on the right are strikeouts. And all 4 of these pitches are sliders. They're all sliders. And there are a couple things that I noticed that were different. Now, the first is that he's using his windup step. There's runners on third base in the strikeout ones. So, that is, clouding that. But now that I'm thinking about it, there's actually runners on third base when the home run was throwing. So, okay, anyway, let's talk about it. Let's talk about this. All right, hang on. Back up. I'm talking to myself. This is real time, baby. You're looking at how the magic happens. So, everyone watch the video now. On the left, there is no little hitch step on the windup. Okay, on the right, there's a little hitch step. It's not like he's basically doing his full motion, where he has that it's not like a full over the head windup or anything. They just a little hitch step, and he kind of comes set. And what that does is it brings the weight onto his back foot before launching forward. Something that we'll point out is that there's the slightest little bit of tilt on the videos on the right when he's striking out, where he's leaning more. What this is pointing towards to me is greater rotation. And I think where you're actually seeing the greatest evidence of that is in the leg kick. So if you look, especially in the video where we're playing the Red Sox on the left-hand side, that first video that I'm showing, when he's doing his follow through, he's just kind of dragging his back foot behind him. It's like it's kind of an afterthought in a way. Like, oh yeah, I have to bring my foot with me. Whereas if you look at the video on the right and you look at his right leg, he actually it's almost like a hip flexor warm-up stretch where you're like bringing your right knee up and around where he's like torquing it. And like that to me is the difference between the cement mixer, which is what you saw when he gave up the home run, where he's just dragging his left foot, and the absolutely phenomenal slider that, paints the outside corner, sends Yuli Gurriel to the bench, and we're on our way out of the inning. So just look out for that, and we'll talk about Ruben Niebla more, but I think especially because he got such a slow start to the season, as John said, the revenge of the toe, as I have been saying on Padres Hot Tub, when you rush back, these sort of things start to happen, but I hope that he is on the right track. So with that in mind, let's look a little bit towards the future, what our projected rotation is for 2024. And this is assuming that we do not re-sign Blake Snell, just for the sake of argument. Our kind of locked-in starters are definitely Yu Darvish, definitely Joe Musgrove, probably Ryan Weathers, but who knows? You're shaking your head. I'm curious. What do you think about that?
We have a little document that's running that we reference. That's how the sausage is made, and he has what Ryan Weathers penciled in as the third starter for our 2024 projected rotation, which is just like, oof. I hope that's not what happens.
I don't mean to say that I think he's going to be our third starter. I just mean there are two question marks after that. Yeah.
But when you have a list running that, Ryan Weathers, because who else would it be? Like, everybody else has options or at least a chance to get out of their contract. So right now, penciled in for 2024 is Darvish, Musgrove, and then Weathers. So there's some questions to be answered there.
I'd say in terms of Michael Wacha, he probably on that month alone that he had in May can justify opting out of his deal if he gets the chance. Because I think he has a $6.5 million option for next year, so he can probably command more. I think that unless he absolutely, sucks the rest of the year, basically, he will be, able to ask for more than those $6.5 million. It's just now a matter of, are we going to opt in for 2 years of $16 million per for, which I highly doubt. It would mean he'd have to pitch like that the rest of the time. So, Wacha, I think is very likely to be at least back on the open market. He might try and negotiate an extension or something like that, but Lugo, like we said, is a question mark. Martinez is a question mark, and then now we start to get into kind of our pipeline, if you want to call it that. But our technically next pitchers that are up in Jay Groom, Adam Mazur, and Jackson Wolf. Do you want to start talking about any of those guys, John?
Yeah, so as a fan of the San Diego Padres, I am well versed in digging deeply into prospects and hoping that at some point in the future they are good. Then there's reasons to be excited about each of these three. They're all basically the old ones of the Padres prospects that at least give us some inclination that maybe they'll be able to contribute in the near future. I mean, Jay Groom's 24, he's in AAA. Adam Mazur is 22, he's only in high A, and Jackson Wolf is 24, he's in AA. And all of them are probably, on the periphery of the major league roster. However, it does seem to me, in my own vantage point of who I think AJ Preller is through his experience with the major league roster, is that it does seem like he wants a solid top three at least for a playoff aspiration type team, and then he maybe solve the 4, 5, 6, 7 kind of slots in the rotation with whatever answers he can do, maybe at a little bit of a cheaper level, and maybe those are prospects, maybe those are cheap contracts, maybe he gets maybe not the Michael Wacha, but another Michael Wacha, another Seth Lugo going forward, and those are things that you can answer. But do I see Jay Groom, Adam Mazur, and Jackson Wolf being, say, the number 3 or even 4 starter going forward? No, I don't. I don't think that that's what his solution is going to be. I mean, I can talk about them if you want, but because I do want to get into each of these players just a little bit at least. But I do not personally think that they are the solution for the like number 3, number 4, number 5 spot in a rotation going forward.
Yeah, really quickly, some of the interesting trade target potentials, people that have some years of control are Shane Bieber, Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff, and then so they all have one more RBer, and then Dylan Cease has 2 more years, and then Eduardo Rodriguez, he has a opt out on his contract that he can exercise or not. If he opts in to his contract, he has 3 years and $49 million left. But there's an interesting group of names that are in our potential free agent list for 2024. Obviously, Shohei Ohtani's at the top. He's kind of almost not worth talking about because he's just going to be such an outlier. So when we're thinking about how we want to build out this rotation, I don't think it's worth spending a lot of time talking about Ohtani. If he's on the Padres, I will be excited. That is my Shohei Ohtani take. Do you have anything else to add on that?
No, I would love Shohei Ohtani. I hope we get him. If we do not get him, I will not be shocked by that.
Okay. This is the end of Ohtani Corner on Pods of Upper Placement. So we have some names. Clayton Kershaw, do not think he will be playing for the Padres next year.
Because we did the crying meme. He can't come to the Padres.
Certainly. He can't come here now. We have to put the happy Kershaw face and reverse the curse, and then we will be free once again. Hey, have you had enough Nola on the Padres? Because guess what? Aaron Nola's a free agent next year. And
if we keep Austin Nola this whole year without DFAing him, it freaking better be to get Aaron Nola. If we get Aaron Nola, then all retconning why we kept Austin Nola will have made sense if we get Aaron Nola. That's the only thing that could explain it to me going forward.
I love this. I love this so much. I'm tinfoil hats on. All right. This is all.
What else could explain it, right? What else could explain it?
I don't know. We have a weird Bond villain as a GM. Other than that, that's the only thing I can say.
Or Bomel's just he just sees what the pitchers want. There's nobody that can control the pitching staff like Austin Nola with his sub 100 almost batting average.
Yeah. Okay. So some other interesting names. Obviously Blake Snell we mentioned, Lucas Giolito. Noah Syndergaard, Julio Urias is someone who I, as a person, do not want to see anywhere near the organization. But as
nose goes on that one.
Yeah, I know, no kidding. But he is on this list. Adam Wainwright will be a fossil by this time next year, but he is technically a free agent. Eduardo Rodriguez, as we mentioned, Martin Perez, Sonny Gray, Luis Severino, Jordan Montgomery, Frankie Matas, Tyler Mahle, and Jack Flaherty. Any names on there stick out to you before we move on?
I mean, I do like the idea of a lefty. If Snell is going to go, we're going to be Ryan Weathers will be, I guess, our lefty going forward. And then Jay Groom if he makes it. But I do like the idea of a lefty at least, maybe a Jordan Montgomery is gonna fill out a 3rd spot or a 4th spot in a rotation. Eduardo Rodriguez is a guy that I have always liked and think that his value is more than he gets paid on the open market, and so that's a guy that I would like as well. But I don't know. Any of these guys are fine if we're willing to pay him. I think that it's going to be tough to pay them when you're already paying Darvish $18 million in AAV and then Musgrove $20 million in AAV. Now you're going to, all of these guys that you have on this list here are probably going to be close to $20 million. And now you're paying, $50 million for your top 3 when you're also paying a ton of players forever on the position portion of your team. A lot of money.
Yeah. So with that in mind, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the starting pitching prospects that we have in the organization?
Oh yeah, man. This is my sweet spot. I know how to do this. I've been a Padres fan for a long time. So Jay Groom. Jay Groom is a guy that I was thinking, at least for myself, that like this guy, age 24, just had a very good season last year, where his ERA was about 3.5, both for Boston and for us at the AA, AAA levels. This is the guy that I thought that would be our, 6th, 7th starter rather than Ryan Weathers before the season started. And for some reason he wasn't. And so far this year, he's been just god awful in AAA. He has an 8.87 ERA, and his walk rate is strangely double what it's ever been. It's at 7.17 walks per 9, which means that just walks alone is nearly 1 per inning. You talk about whip and you want your whip to be around 1. His walks alone without any hits are almost 1, And so it's like, what is happening with him? So I did the little trick that I do to look up StatCast numbers on AAA players, because that's available now. And I was surprised to see that for some reason, him in particular, as well as like Moises Lugo, but like not very many Padres prospects, but there are some, like all of their pitch shapes are just hidden. I don't know why. I don't know if this is some kind of like tricky thing that AJ Preller's doing, where he's saying, yeah, you can post the stats, but you're not going to do these couple guys. I don't know. Maybe that's just a conspiracy theory that I'm making up. But for whatever reason, his pitch shapes aren't shown. So I can't really see like if he's trying to change the shapes on any of his pitches. What I did see was that he's increasing his curveball usage a lot in general. And when he came out of the draft, he was somebody who had a dominant curveball. And obviously the Padres were, one of the teams that were going after him hard. And it does seem as though somebody in our organization said, you got to bring that curveball back and let's see what we can do with it. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's what's causing his high walk rates. Maybe he's like trying to force those curveballs and he's, not able to command them very well. We'll see going forward. That at least is a reason for me to be like excited, despite his poor performance, is that he's trying to change things up. And, at some point he's allowed to just scratch the curveball and go back to his repertoire that he had last year, which was, pretty successful at the upper minors. So maybe he's still the same pitcher and he's just like experimenting. That's something that is exciting for me. But I don't know. He doesn't seem like, based on the fact that he's kind of in the experimental stage, that he's like on the verge of coming up to the majors. And at age 24 in AAA, you kind of want that guy to be ready to come up to the majors. But I'd be hesitant to think that he's like kind of on the verge of coming up right now. And then just some other guys that I wanted to get into. Adam Mazur is kind of like my kind of interesting pet project. He's 22. He's in high A. He's had a great year so far. In his 31 innings in high A, he has a 1.45 ERA, which is obviously very, very good. He was always expected to be a high riser because he was drafted out of college, and I think it was his junior year. So he's kind of an older, he's 22. He's an older prospect. So he's the kind of guy, maybe like Eric Lauer, who just like immediately makes it to the majors. And I wouldn't be surprised if he immediately makes it to the majors. But the thing, unlike Eric Lauer until he went to the Milwaukee Brewers, is that he's already made that transition into diving into the Rapsodo and TrackMan technology. So he did that like while he was in college in order to change the pitch shape that he has. And now he has a four-seamer with ride because he was trying to, manipulate his data in order to make the shape of his pitchers better. And, he can hit 95 pretty consistently, or 92 to 95 with ride. And then he has a couple of good breaking balls, which miss bats. So that's already a good prospect going forward. And he has a changeup as well. So he's got like those 4 pitches that you can say is starter level. And the thing about a person that's already kind of dove into the Rapsodo kind of TrackMan technology is that they probably don't have that higher gear. It's not like he's has a great chance to get much better because nobody has told him about this in the first place. But, he's probably somebody who's adherent to any kinds of changes in a repertoire. If you say like, hey, this could make you better, it sounds like if you convince him properly with valid data, then he would adhere to it, which already is like a prospect that I kind of like. So I think he is kind of more of that like Eric Lauer type prospect to me, where it's like, I think he's going to be a fast riser. I think he's going to contribute. I think that he might be better than Eric Lauer because he kind of got that data earlier than Eric Lauer did, because it seems like he didn't really get that data on how to change his fastball, at least until he went to the Brewers, Eric Lauer, that is. I am excited about Adam Mazur in particular going forward.
Right on. So there's just a few other names on this list. Robbie Snelling. We don't need to spend too much time talking about him, but he's off to a very hot start in Lake Elsinore. He has a 1.23 ERA so far, which is very exciting. His FIP is 3.74, so which is a little bit more down to earth. So, just something to pay attention to. But he's got a fastball and a really, really good curveball. We'll obviously keep our eyes on him, but he's 19 years old. Other names that we're going to mention so that people don't yell at us in the comments. Jackson Wolf. We'll come back to Dylan Lesko. That's something for you, John. But then just really quickly, Victor Lizarraga, who is Lizarraga, right? Lizarraga? Anyway. He's in Fort Wayne at the moment, not having a great season, 5.40 ERA, but it is the season is young, and so is he. He is also 19 years old. And then finally, Jairo Iriarte, which is a name that we totally know. We're very confident in our pronunciation 30 minutes ago. He is also in Fort Wayne right now. He is off to a pretty decent start, a 3.34 ERA, but mind you, he's been quite unremarkable up until this point. So, I wouldn't say that he is someone that I'm super excited about, but he did get a Pedro Martinez comp from a scout. He's a little smallish, lean, athletic guy, a bit reminiscent of Pedro Martinez, which what better compliment could you get as starting pitcher than being compared to Pedro Martinez? But before Garrett Hawkins and Henry Williams are just a couple other guys that, again, we're gonna say their names and we're gonna keep our eyes on them. But they're young. They're none of these people are in AA that we've talked about. So they're still quite far away at this point. So with that in mind, John, you want to bring us home with Dylan Lesko?
Yeah. One thing is that I remember Anderson Espinoza also got a ton of Pedro Martinez
That's true.
comps.
Well, he was on the Red Sox, in that organization for a while. So I think that there was a lot of pining for that. But yes, he did indeed get that comparison many times.
Right. And they're both, as fair as velocity, good off-speed pitches. Jairo reminds me a little bit of Ruiz last year in that he's kind of a high riser, and Robbie Snelling kind of so far too are kind of a couple guys that I would think there's other GMs out there that are probably asking for these guys on the trade market for like a mid-level or high mid-level type player that we would ask for in a trade. So don't be surprised if Robbie Snelling or Jairo Iriarte are traded this trade deadline. But yeah, before we get into the Dylan Lesko prospect analysis, which he's an exciting prospect. Top pick for us last year. He had the Tommy John surgery, and so he dropped a little bit on the board. But I just wanted to do a little bit of a history lesson in terms of prospect analysis that like I said, have done a lot of on account of we have always been bad. So I have always been looking at the top of every board and investigating the top picks because those are the ones that we're kind of gunning for. And we normally get guys like Matt Bush. So I'm going to go back to the 2001 draft, which is not the Matt Bush draft. It is the DeJuan Brazelton draft. And in the DeJuan Brazelton draft, the Tampa Bay Rays, before they were the Tampa Bay Rays, when they were the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, and were not quite as analytically astute as they are now, they drafted DeJuan Brazelton, third overall, right after Joe Mauer and Mark Pryor, and above Mark Teixeira. To be fair, Gavin Floyd also was the number 4 pick for the Phillies, so the Phillies messed up too. But DeJuan Brazelton was selected third overall. And when DeJuan Brazelton was selected third overall, there was a little bit of a outcry about how that was a poor choice, or at least there was people who were concerned about that choice at third overall, because third overall is obviously super high, especially for a high school pitcher. And he was dominant. He had a great fastball with good movement, and he had a dominant changeup. However, he had never shown a proclivity to be able to spin the baseball. And so that started a whole like generational thing with being able to show that you can spin a baseball when you have a dominant changeup for draft picks going forward. It just was a thing forevermore after. And there's a good reason. So if you're able to spin a breaking ball, there's kind of a couple tiers of prospects. There's a pitcher that has a great breaking ball. And Jay Groom was this kind of prospect, which is what made him so exciting, is that he was able to spin a nasty curveball, and he had a high spin rate, and it was nasty, had a big break. And there's like that next layer down where, yeah, they have a good spin rate, but they've never been able to like master a specific pitch. Like they don't have a dominant slider or a dominant curveball. And then there's next down, which is like DeJuan Brazelton or maybe Chris Paddock, who have a dominant fastball, a dominant changeup, but have never shown an ability to have a good breaking ball of any sort. And the reason why that's concerning from a prospect standpoint is that you can do so many things when you have a high spin rate on a breaking ball. There's like so many, just like, I always think of it like in those action movies when you fall off a ceiling, or like off a rooftop, and then you hit those things. There's always like Chris Rock movies, you think about it, you always like hit like 3 little soft landings on the way down before you eventually land on a car, and that makes it so that you didn't die. That's what pitchers do as well, because they have so many options going forward. If you can't throw a good curveball, you know what you can do? You can try your slider. Oh shoot, my slider doesn't work. I can throw a cutter. You know what else I can do? I can vary all of these pitches in a manner that like Yu Darvish does, where you can throw a hard cutter, you can throw a soft cutter, you can throw a hard slider, you can throw a slurve, you can throw the new fashionable sweeper, you can throw a curveball, you can throw an eephus, and now suddenly you have a bajillion pitches just like Yu Darvish has. And so you get to work through that pitcher and say, like, you know, these are all your options going forward. And so when a pitcher is unable to show that they have any spin, it's basically, shoot, this fastball and changeup better work, or we have to teach them how to spin a baseball. And sometimes that's really hard. Chris Paddock is a great example of this. It's like, you know, this is why John Gennaro over on Padres Hot Tub was always saying like he would be a good closer, and why it's because he had Trevor Hoffman, you know, comparisons. You can have a good fastball and a good changeup as a reliever, but if those are your best pitches as a starting pitcher, you got to have some kind of spin. You got to have a curveball, a slider, at least to show someone. And he was never able to really develop one. And so that's the DeJuan Brazelton problem. And so you'll see that in almost all scouting reports for somebody who has a really good dominant fastball and a good dominant changeup. And that's Dylan Lesko. He has a dominant fastball with ride, a dominant changeup, one of the best people that have ever seen as a prospect. However, he, unlike DeJuan Brazelton, has spin rate. And he's shown to be successful with his curveball, and that's it. That's already enough. Like the fact that he has that spin rate means that with good prospect development, he can develop in some manner or another. Maybe he sticks with the curveball. Maybe he has to change it to a slider or a cutter or whatever. That portion of it, that extra part that everybody's always going to put in a draft recap, which, you know, you can just look at that for all draft prospects going forward. They'll always say whether there's some kind of spin. They'll always do that. And that's because now you're saying this is a starting pitcher rather than a reliever. And so Dylan Lesko has a dominant fastball, a dominant changeup, and then has shown that he has high spin rate. This is a guy that I personally am excited for going forward.
So we've talked about our starters. Let's move on to the bullpen. We're going to kind of power through this really quickly. Our current bullpen, Josh Hader is on the final year of his deal. He's in his RB years. He's $14.1 million this year. Robert Suarez, have you seen him on milk cartons? Because we have not seen him anywhere near the Padres bullpen this year. He did sign a 5-year, $46 million deal prior to this year that he can opt out of in the middle of that. But certainly an eye on the future for that deal. Luis Garcia is here on a 1 year, $3.5 million. Steven Wilson is, he's got plenty of time left with the Padres. He came up as an older prospect. He is 28 years old. We were going to be getting all of his prime. Nick Martinez, we talked about. Drew Pomeranz, all-time finesse god. In terms of, I genuinely wish him well. Like, it's like that really sucks as a player. These guys really want to compete. I don't want to make light of that, but I do think the Padres will be very happy to have the $8.5 million a year that they are paying him back when they are not paying him after this year. Tim Hill is making minimal money, as is Adrian Morejon. And then you've got a bunch of pre-arb guys: Drew Carlton, Tom Cosgrove, Brent Honeywell, Domingo Tapia, Ray Kerr, and then some prospects that we're going to touch on very briefly, and then ask the question about Josh Hader. So really quickly, there's two that I'm excited about. Kevin Kopps. He is 26 years old. He's in Double-A. He's been in Double-A for quite some time. If the name sounds familiar, if you're like, wait, I don't know any Padres, low-ranking prospect relievers, why do I know Kevin Kopps' name? He won the Golden Spikes Award for college baseball in 2021 with University of Arkansas, whose mascot is the who, John?
Razorbacks,
baby.
It's Razorbacks.
Razorbacks. So yes, he won the Golden Spikes Award in college baseball. He finished with an 0.80 ERA that year in 89 and 2/3 innings. 11 saves, 131 strikeouts in 89 and 2/3 innings, 18 walks, and 50 hits. So a very impressive year. He has come to be in the Padres organization. He's been in Double-A all of 2021, all of 2022, and so far all of 2023, and has had, mixed results, so to speak. He has a 3.70 ERA right now, but his strikeout rate is starting to climb back up. So that is something to keep his eye on. I'm assuming they'll move him up to Triple-A just at some point this year, solely from the fact that he's spent some considerable time at Double-A, and he's starting to perform decently there. And then Alec Jacob, who's someone else who's also at Double-A. He has had a much more interesting season so far in that he has a 1.17 ERA currently. And he performed very well in Double-A last year as well. He had a 1.83 ERA in 34 innings at Double-A. However, he went up to Triple-A for a little bit, and in 13 innings, he put up almost a 7 ERA. So he started back at Double-A this year. And, he is another high strikeout guy. He's always been a high strikeout guy. It's just a matter of, whether or not he can get some of that results. And John, is there something you wanted to talk about on the bullpen before we move on to the Josh Hader question?
The main point here is there's a lot of guys kind of on the periphery who are kind of all like 24 to 30-ish age that are obviously very cheap because they're all like, just coming up. There's the Drew Carltons, Tom Cosgrove, Brent Honeywell, Domingo Tapia, Ray Kerr, Kevin Kopps, Alec Jacob, Moises Lugo. So just like arguing this going forward, and Steven Wilson's also super cheap going forward. There's a lot of arms, optionable arms that you can kind of move up and down in a modular fashion that are cheap. That are pretty good arms, at least have shown to be decent arms going forward. Even if some of them, fail out, there's enough going forward that the argument of paying for Hader is, are we paying for him as the staple and therefore having all these guys fill in this modular fashion below him? Or are we unnecessarily paying Hader in a manner that we could pay, a starting pitcher going forward?
So let's talk about Josh Hader. He's going to be a free agent after this season. And the benchmark was set last year by Steve Cohen and the Mets when they threw 5 years and $102 million to Edwin Diaz. That's over $20 million a year, which is certainly unheard of for a reliever. And while that might not be the final price that Josh Hader signs for, I certainly think that number is going to be in the back of his mind as he's negotiating. So, John, do you think that we should be paying Josh Hader or no?
So I think how this was framed originally, at least how I assumed it was before Suarez got hurt, was that Suarez was going to be paid, and then Hader was on our team, and Hader was going to take over the 9th. Suarez was going to be the 8th, and then Suarez is going to graduate to the 9th after Hader leaves, in the event that he leaves. If he has a reasonable contract offer, then he'll stay in the 9th, and Suarez will stay in the 8th. However, Suarez hasn't pitched at all this year, and there's a little bit of this like, is this Drew Pomeranz again? Like, is there's elbow injury? What does that mean? That's a little bit of a scary thing to say. So the question is, in the playoffs, you want a dominant reliever, at least one, and ideally you have maybe a starting pitcher that you can have take over some of those important relief innings in the playoffs in general. And so, to be honest, I think that you only need one as a staple. I would only pay for one. If you're talking about $20 million a year, that's a little bit pricey. I would pay that for a top line starting pitcher who you could then use as a starting pitcher during the regular season and transition to the bullpen in the event that you need to. That is worth $20 million to me, but somebody who might get hurt in the middle of the season and then not be available for the playoffs, to me, not worth it. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, it's not worth it for me either. For one, we already are paying someone like a closer. That's Robert Suarez. He hasn't pitched so far. And I think that the plan was always for this year to be, we'll have an ultra pen of Hader and Suarez, with some combination of Steven Wilson and Tim Hill and like all those guys, going backwards from there. And then that obviously has not worked out, both because Suarez has been hurt and because Josh Hader hasn't been quite himself in the way that we expected when we traded for him. I think that we are going to have a lot of these peripheral guys come up that they can at least cobble together some sort of bullpen. So I just think that whatever Hader's asking price is just going to be, there's just no way he's going to be able to live up to that deal. And like, that's, I think the issue is that is he going to be able to provide the value? We're almost always overpaying in free agent deals. And I think we already have enough of those on the San Diego Padres. Frankly, I don't think that we need to just tack on to that with Josh Hader. So I am also a no on this one. So really quickly before we wrap up, we wanted to talk about Ruben Niebla, who I did request a connection with on LinkedIn today. So I will provide an update to the Pods Above Replacement, but he has a LinkedIn and you can just request to be connected to Ruben Niebla. So, maybe it works, maybe I don't know what I'm going to talk about. He's going to be out
next week.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to be talking about pitch shapes.
We need like a really like motivating factor for like, what is the goal of Pods Above Replacement? Is there like an interview we want to get? Is there like
Ruben Niebla, obviously.
Okay, so Ruben Niebla is the goal. We got to get Ruben Niebla on. So Ruben Niebla, he is from Calexico, California. Shout out to my Inland Empire, Imperial County gang. He played college ball at Azusa Pacific University, and their mascot is who, John?
Azusa Pacific?
Yeah, if you know this, I'm going to lose my mind.
That's a tough one. I've heard this before in my life. Are they green?
I don't know.
Sea green?
I just Googled their mascot.
I don't know what it is.
They're the Cougars. They're the Cougars. The famously Christian animal Cougars. So he played in indie ball and in the minor leagues, but never made it to the majors as a pitcher. But he did play for some very cool indie ball teams like the Gaston King Cougars of the Atlantic League, the Corpus Christi Barracudas of the Texas Louisiana League, which if anyone has a Corpus Christi Barracudas jersey or swag, I will buy it for them for any dollar amount. That sounds so cool. So he bounced around a little bit, but never cracked through. And pretty quickly after joining or after leaving his playing career, he joined the Cleveland Guardians organization in 2001 and immediately became part of their player development program. Acting as a pitching coach on some of their minor league affiliates, but overall just kind of like working within the organization. And he was on the minor league side for 11 years and then moved to, he was the interim pitching coach at one point. And then, was never he was an assistant pitching coach, then was never the full-time head pitching coach for the major league organization in a permanent capacity. But he just had his fingerprints all over that organization's development program. And it's one of the most prolific in terms of production over the 2010s of really great talent. Corey Kluber, obviously Padres legend, was someone who was traded there and then went on to succeed. He was kind of the first. And they've since spat out Shane Bieber, Tristan McKenzie, boo, Trevor Bauer, boo, Mike Levinger, boo. But for the purposes of this conversation, was a success story. Zach Plesac, Aaron Savale, James Karinchak, and Emmanuel Clase, also Padres legend. It's a very great organization. Jeff Passan, when he was a writer at Yahoo Sports, wrote an article in 2015, just kind of talking about, they use weighted balls, which was a thing that was like, whoa, that's crazy, back then, or at least when people were talking about it. And now, and they had those M-Throw sleeves that track like kinetic movement with Bluetooth and then send it back to a computer. And it's like, these guys are doing crazy stuff. And it's really, a testament to something I think the organization is doing well, which is something I've talked about on the other show frequently, which is bringing in people who have a curiosity about baseball and who have the idea of like, where can this game take us? Like what new avenues can we find to this? And so I not only because he's a local kid and grew up in the area and everything like that, but it's cool to see someone like that, kind of come home and take on this team where he lived here in the off season and all that stuff. But I just think it's the right type of hire for the team, and I hope that they continue to look for people who are kind of pushing the bounds of the game. John, what are your thoughts on Ruben Niebla besides wanting to interview him?
Well, we will interview him. We already decided that's going to happen. You distracted me with your saying Calexico is part of the Inland Empire. As somebody who lived in the Redlands for a year, I had to look this up. That's not part of the Inland Empire. Azusa Pacific
It's Imperial County. I'm sorry. It's everything that's past Alpine is Inland Empire to me. But you're right. Thank you for correcting me. It is Imperial County, not Inland Empire.
I spent a year in the Redlands, and my whole life was just breathing in smog the whole time. It was just that LA smog just falls into a valley, and it's just like pure smog. So that's the wonderful life of living in the Inland Empire. I recommend it for everybody. But Ruben Niebla is just the single bright spot to me in terms of like organizational talent that I respect, that is going to develop players in a positive manner. He seems to have that skill of understanding analytics, and the more important skill, because we understand analytics, but the important skill is being able to give that information to major league ball players in a manner that allows them to change whatever they're doing for the positive. And it seems that there's teams that are haves and have-nots in that, that realm of development. And the Guardians were one of those. They seem to be able to espouse that these are certain things that you can do in order to change yourself for the better. And it does seem like a lot of those teams are kind of teams that rely on kind of those developmental players to be the major part of their team. And we're not that. Like, we're not the Guardians in terms of paying payroll. We're not the Rays in terms of payroll. We're not the Brewers in terms of payroll. We're closer to the Dodgers. So the Dodgers have been able to kind of skirt that threshold wherein they're able to get stars to adhere to their, analytics, which is something that is kind of the next threshold for us, I think, as a team. And Niebla thus far, especially with like Joe Musgrove, for example, like that's a guy that maybe wasn't a star before he came to the Padres, but he was at least like a bona fide major league pitcher who made changes, especially with his breaking balls with Ruben Niebla and, his windup, as you detailed before. He is a guy that is exciting for me, that he can at least, kind of convey important information on the pitching side to major league players in a manner that might change their actions going forward. And to me, it's kind of an easy argument in a way that it's not as easy for hitting, because from the pitching standpoint, you can argue, as we've argued before, that Stuff Plus, or whatever each individual team's proprietary version of Stuff Plus is, that will get you money, right? And so you can just say like, all right, you can agree with me or disagree with me, whatever, but this pitch shape will make you more money on the open market. And to me, that's like, oh, do I want to make more money? Yes, I do want to make more money. And you can make the counter argument that like the Rays and the Brewers, for example, kind of do it in a bad light, because they'll say like, oh, you want your fastball ride to be this many inches. But then when you go to arbitration, they're like, yeah, but what was your record? Like, what was your record? Like, were you above 500? Oh, you were below 500? We're not going to pay you. And then those pitchers, I could see how you feel gaslighted as like a Corbin Burns, where you're like, I've done everything you said. My pitch shapes are great. My numbers are great. And you're arguing that I wasn't a good enough leader and therefore I don't make enough money. But like, and I can see how that'd be frustrating, but we have the money to pay those people. You know what I mean? So like we can have if we're able to develop through like, those pre-arb years and then through the arb, where we are basically always paying the arb prices, and then into free agency, I can see where we could generate like goodwill towards those players. We just haven't done that yet. And so Niebla, I'm excited about, as far as like those like early major leaguers and even bona fide major leaguers, making them better. I'm a little bit more concerned about maybe the minor league talent developing, and then especially on the hitting side, because it's harder to argue this bat speed will make you money. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. The State of the Union, John, is strong? Question mark. Just don't look into the future, I guess. Just live in the now. A lot of people are telling me to be present in my life, so I think that that's the attitude of gratitude that I'm going to have about the Padres pitching staff, which so far in 2023 is pretty good. For the rest of time, we'll see. So, anything you want to add before we get out of here?
Austin Nola will get us Aaron Nola, and it will be great. One more thing is just like a funny little story about me going back into the Dewan Brazelton research, is that I looked up some videos on him, and the first thing that showed up was his son pitching, Dewan Brazelton Jr. on YouTube, which was very concerning for me. I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
Don't like the fact that that I watched him and now his kid is trying to make a major league run. However, the second video I looked up was him pitching against the Red Sox, and that was Don Orsillo announcing.
Yeah.
So then I felt better again. I'm like, yeah, that guy, that's my era guy. So
yeah,
I felt comfortable again.
I mean, Bronny James is going to play basketball at my alma mater in the fall, and I'm just like, oh god, I remember being a kid and being like, your dad watching. Oh god. Anyway, we look very silly doing this whole acting like we were very old. We're just we boys who are hopeful to watch this Padres team eventually right the ship. Certainly, the pitching is not the problem, and so we will wrap up this show with a solid State of the Union address. John, you made it through being the designated survivor. Thank you for your service, and we will see you all next time.